August 18th, 1944. The sea is black glass and the wind smells like rain. Somewhere in that darkness, a chain of ships creeps forward, fuel soldiers hope, threading a narrow gate between islands. Far below, in a steel tube the size of a small house, a young American officer presses his eye to a periscope and watches the horizon turn into a set of glowing ghosts on radar. He waits, counts, breathes. Then, without a word, he lets metal run. The night answers with fire. An escort carrier blooms like a struck match, and a transport the size of a skyscraper on its side starts swallowing water faster than men can climb ladders. The convoy scatters, but the ocean won't give them places to hide. Every zigzag feels guessed in advance. Every flare lights empty waves. Somewhere out there, engines idle. Somewhere else, torpedoes are already in the water. If you were on one of those decks, you wouldn't see an enemy. You just hear a new sound roll across the hull and know what it means. This wasn't luck. This was a plan sharpened in silence. Submarines that could see at night when others were blind. Skippers who learned to stalk by listening. Code breakers on the far side of the world, turning numbers into ambushes. And a single wartime decision, made within hours of Pearl Harbor, that quietly rewrote the rules of the sea. The result wasn't a battle you could film from a cliff. It was a squeeze, patient and merciless, that made an island empire feel smaller every month. But the truth of this night goes beyond tonnage and tactics. It lives in the psychology of sailors who started refusing assignments because the routes themselves felt cursed. It lives in the diaries that stopped mid-sentence when a ship went dark. It lives in the strange, uneasy stories that surfaced after the war, unmarked transports, safe passage promises, wrecks found decades later thousands of meters down, still keeping their secrets. Tonight, we're going to step inside that undersea war and see why the hunters became the most feared force in the Pacific. Even when they were outnumbered, even when their main weapon didn't work for a year and a half, even when the enemy never saw them coming. We'll follow one convoy into a storm and ask how a handful of boats could shatter a strategy built on steel, oil, and bravado. And we'll learn why, for thousands of men, the scariest sound in World War II wasn't artillery or bombs or the roar of engines. It was the quiet rush of something you couldn't see moving through black water, always on time. It didn't start with a torpedo. It started with a sentence. Hours after Pearl Harbor, American leadership made a choice that most civilians wouldn't hear about for years. No warnings, no polite signals, no surface visits. Enemy shipping was now a fair target the moment it sailed. It sounded cold. It was. But the logic was simple. Japan lived by the sea. Cut the sea and the empire would feel it in its lungs. That decision changed the job description of a submarine. No longer a scout for the battle fleet, no longer a supporting act. From that day forward, the boat itself was the strategy. It would stalk, strike, and disappear, while the rest of the world argued about what was legal. The ocean doesn't care about law. It cares about who can see first, who can shoot straight, and who can vanish faster than fear can reach the surface. And once you give hunters the green light, the next question is obvious. Do the weapons work? At first they didn't. Skippers risked everything to put perfect shots on target and watched ships keep steaming like nothing happened. Hits thudded like sledgehammers against an iron door, then silence. Crews looked at each other in the red glow of control rooms and felt something worse than danger. Doubt. The problem wasn't courage. It was hardware. The warhead that should have cracked hulls was unreliable. The fuse that should have woken it up went to sleep. The depth controls cheated low. Shots skated under targets and never kissed steel. Men kept hunting anyway because that was the job. But confidence bled out with every dud. Then a few stubborn leaders did what war sometimes demands. They stopped trusting paperwork and started testing reality. Instead of accepting the charts, they hung nets at known depths. They fired where cliffs could bruise a torpedo's nose and show what bent or broke. The evidence was ugly and liberating. Fixes followed. And when the fixes stuck, the curve of the war bent with them. From that moment, the ocean became a chalkboard. You could write your equation in radar angles and knots, and it would add up to the same answer again and again. Night changed everything. Submarines learned to ride the surface after sunset, when waves masked their shapes and radar turned black water into map lines. A convoy doesn't look like much to the naked eye at 2 a.m. To a scope paired with a good set, it looks like opportunity. The rhythm became simple and terrible. Find the column, shadow it, slide to the beam, and send metal. Engines roared for a minute, then died to a whisper while the crew counted the seconds to impact. 1, 2, 3, a long 4. And then the sea itself seemed to kick. On bad nights, depth charges tumbled down like a drum roll on the hull. Men gripped bunks, stared at pipes, and held onto a breath that wasn't theirs anymore. On good nights, the ocean swallowed the evidence and left only smoke, oil, and a silence that felt heavy. What made the difference wasn't magic. It was patience, practice, and a kind of ice water calm that let a skipper choose between greed and survival at 2 a.m. If the weapons were finally honest, the next edge was simple. See what the other side can't. Japan's Navy trained for a different movie. It dreamed of big gun battles, lines of warships, thunder on the horizon, glory in daylight. Protecting slow freighters. That felt like escort duty in a parade. No one wanted to lead. Convoys were late, thin, and sometimes thrown together with ships that had no business guarding anything. Worse, the gear lagged. Early in the war, depth charges often couldn't reach the depths U.S. boats called home. Sonar struggled where layers of warm and cold water bent sound away. Radar installs came slowly, and the culture, brave to the point of reckless, favored offense, even when the battlefield had quietly changed from grand fleets to steel boxes carrying oil and grain. A doctrine, built for decisive battles, met an enemy waging 1,000 quiet ambushes. You can be fearless and still be unprepared. The ocean doesn't award medals for the difference. So if you're late to convoys, light on escorts, and blind at night, how does the enemy always seem to be waiting? Because sometimes he is. Far from the front, code breakers sifted numbers until they turned into routes, timetables, and choke points. Pair that with subborne radar, and the hunt wasn't guesswork. It was scheduling. Boats didn't just wander hoping to get lucky. They took positions where traffic had to pass and let geometry do the rest. That's why sailors started to feel cursed. Zigzags that should have saved them got read like a book. Detours ended up under the same moon with a new set of eyes watching. Captains argued for longer routes that felt safer and lost the argument to fuel, deadlines, and higher orders. You can change your path. You can't change islands, currents, or the math of a strait. And once the ambush is set, the question turns human. Who's down there? And what happens when the lights go out? War is headlines about battles, but victory more often is logistics. Oil in the tanks, ore in the mills, rice in the bowls. Japan needed the sea to keep all three moving. The submarine campaign cut those lines one by one until the map looked like a city with its bridges blown. Tankers didn't make it home. Factories waited for rubber that sat in warehouses thousands of miles away. Aircraft stayed on the ground for lack of fuel. Warships that once chased glory hugged the pier because there wasn't enough oil to light them off. You can call that strategy, blockade, commerce raiding. The sailors who watched their neighborhoods dim at night called it something simpler: empty. This is why the undersea war mattered beyond any single sinking. It didn't just win firefights, it changed the calendar. It told an empire, not this month, and then not this year, until never again felt like a weather report. But the cost wasn't measured only in shortages. It was measured in people. Some names carried whole tragedies inside them. A troop ship rolling over so fast the men inside barely reached a ladder. A carrier going up like a refinery in a windstorm. Bodies in the water when the storm itself was the enemy, and the rescue ships couldn't risk stopping. Survivors clung to wood and prayed. Others stared at black water and chose to jump before the deck went vertical. Then there were the ships no one wanted to fire on but did anyway. Unmarked transports with prisoners or forced laborers locked below. In the silence of the deep, no one could see who was in those holds. After the war, those stories came out slowly with grief and anger braided together. They still do. History can be clear-eyed about strategy and still refuse to look away from pain. And a few sinkings became arguments that never quite ended. Safe passage promises broken, rumors of treasure, salvage expeditions that chased ghosts for decades. The ocean keeps secrets. Sometimes it keeps them long enough to turn sailors into legends and rumor into folklore. Even now, new wrecks appear on sonar screens, with thousands of meters down. Each one is a reminder that statistics used to breathe. The submariners paid too. Boats didn't come back. Families answered the door to telegrams. The men who did return learned to live with dreams of depth charges and the creak of steel under pressure. They were volunteers inside a service that asked them to walk a tightrope in the dark and told them there was no net. So what did they prove? That a small force, used relentlessly, can move history more than 1,000 speeches. That fixing a broken weapon can be the hinge of a campaign. That intelligence, radar, and nerve can remake a battlefield without ever raising a flag on a beach. And that the scariest enemy isn't always the loudest one. Sometimes it's the one you never see, the one that makes you change your route, your schedule, your mind, the one that turns an empire's map into a maze. We've set the board, the decision that rewrote the rules, the torpedo that finally worked, the night vision that turned hunters into ghosts, the convoys that sailed late and light, and the slow choke that starved an empire. Next, we step into one of the war's most brutal nights on the water, where a single convoy learned all of those lessons in a matter of hours, and the ocean wrote a chapter that men would remember for the rest of their lives. Because the truth of this story isn't just how subs won. It's how they made the sea itself feel like it had a mind. Ready? The storm should have been a shield. Wind pressed white scars into the water. Rain stitched the horizon to the sea, and the convoy leaned into it. Carriers, tankers, troop ships, escorts strung out like beads on a wire. Men on deck pulled collars high and watched the dark for shapes that refused to be waves. Below, somewhere off the beam, a submarine's control room hummed like a heart inside steel. The crew spoke in numbers: bearing, range, angle on the bow. The skipper listened, not to voices but to the quiet between them. On nights like this, you don't chase. You let the convoy walk into your patience. Radar paints the line. The wind covers your wake. You wait for the moment when the nearest escort's arc leaves a gap just wide enough to risk it. Then you move. Slow, surface running, spray hitting your face so hard it tastes metallic. The ocean is loud and you're louder for a few minutes. Then you're quiet again. The first hit never sounds like you'd expect. It's not even the explosion. It's the ship's bones reacting. A vibration runs through water long before flame finds air. Somewhere in that column, sailors look at each other with the same thought. Did we just get lucky and miss it? Or is this the one we don't outrun? The answer comes as orange light thunders out from a hull that was whole a breath ago. The escort carrier starts to glow from inside, fuel turning decks into lanterns. The rain hisses when it meets that heat. Panic is geometry. A convoy is only safe if it acts like a single creature. Break that rhythm and every captain thinks he's the only one who sees the path out. Some pour on speed. Others swing wide. Orders crackle and get swallowed by static. The escorts try to knit a net in water that won't hold knots. Their depth charges tumble and bloom far astern of where the submarine already isn't. A second spread runs while the first fire still climbs. The big transport takes it low, and the sound is different, more like a hammer under the floor than a blast in the air. Inside, men feel the deck buck, lights die, and suddenly it's not a ship. It's a building with no stairs. Those near ladders move first. Those farther back move slower or not at all. A few grab rifles out of reflex, as if there's a thing to shoot at. Someone shouts for calm. The hull answers with a groan and decides the timeline by itself. From the submarine's perspective, there's no triumph. Just math you hope you did right. Torpedoes are minutes of waiting turned into a handful of seconds of truth. You feel each confirmation through the soles of your feet. You mark it down. You don't linger. Turn, reposition, think like the escort thinks, then be elsewhere by the time he arrives. The ocean rewards absence. Elsewhere in the column, a captain on an escort carrier orders planes readied because action is the only antidote he trusts to fear. He knows launching in this weather is a gamble, and hunting a ghost at night is worse. He chooses anyway. He doesn't get the chance to find out if the choice was good. Another submarine, another calculation, and the fire moves to a new address. In a few minutes, there's nothing left to command. By midnight, the convoy is 2 stories: the official orders and the reality under them. The orders say, hold formation, maintain speed, protect the troop ships at all costs. Reality says the typhoon is tearing the script and the enemy is reading a different book. Sailors on the outer edges of the column keep their eyes on the faint red glow of a stern lamp up ahead and swear it's getting smaller. If it disappears, you're alone in an ocean that suddenly feels like it's made of eyes. Another transport takes a hit that brings the sound of every loose object on board to life at once. Crates sliding, boots stumbling, chains snapping taut. Someone finds a knife and saws at a rope that refuses to care. Above, a whistle blows 3 times, then once, then stops, for good. When the ship starts to list, the world rewrites itself. Floors become walls, a hallway becomes a shaft. You don't run in a sinking ship, you climb. If you're lucky, the angle is gentle and fast. If you're unlucky, it's steep and faster. The submarines keep their discipline. Greed is the enemy of survival, and survival is the path to more kills. Fire, confirm, fade. Fire again where the mind of an escort won't expect you yet. When depth charges do find the right patch of water, the boat feels it like an insult. Plates flex, gauges jitter, dust shakes loose from places no one's cleaned since stateside. Someone squeezes a charm in a pocket. Someone else swallows hard and makes the next plot on the chart. Fear has a place. It's just not allowed near the instruments. Dawn threatens, but the storm refuses to let morning in. The wreckage field grows while the survivors shrink. Rescue is a choice with a cost. Every minute the escorts slow to pick up men is a minute they offer their backs to wolves. Commanders do the math no one envies. Some stop and throw lines. Others look away and keep steam up. Because there are still ships in the convoy that haven't been hit yet, and the best way to save lives is not to add to the number in the water. By the time the attack peters out, the ocean has made its edits permanent. Ships are missing from the count. Names are already turning into rumors. On the submarines, crews cycle from adrenaline to exhaustion in a single breath. No cheers, just a quiet that isn't peace. The skipper writes in the log, simple words for complicated things. Successful attack, multiple hits, withdrew undamaged, and then continue patrol. Behind the numbers, something less measurable has shifted. The convoy system was supposed to turn the sea into a safer road. After a night like this, it feels like the road itself is booby-trapped. Sailors don't fear the shape of an enemy anymore. They fear the idea of him. That's how a campaign wins before the last ship sinks, by living rent-free in the minds of the next crew, tasked to sail the same route. And this was only one night. Morning didn't arrive. It crawled in under storm clouds that refused to part. The convoy counted heads and found too many missing. Escorts traded clipped reports that said everything without admitting anything. Fuel low, survivors scattered, multiple ships unresponsive. On paper, the system still existed. Schedules, routes, timetables, doctrines. In practice, the ocean had written a veto across all of it. Up the chain, the lesson sounded harsh and simple. Every convoy is a promise you can't keep if the enemy can see in the dark and you can't. Reinforcements for far-off islands became a gamble. Leaders stopped pretending they could win. Commanders argued for more escorts, better sonar, reliable radar, deeper charges, tighter air cover. The math didn't care. Hulls were slow to build, crews were slower to train, and the submarines were already out there patient as gravity. From then on, fear traveled with the manifests. Captains requested detours that added days. Crews swapped rumors with the seriousness of prayer. Men who had sailed a dozen times suddenly looked at the sea like it had eyes. The campaign didn't need to win every attack to win the month. It just had to make the next convoy hesitate, leave a little later, carry a little less, arrive a little more broken than it left. That's how a night becomes a pattern. That's how a pattern becomes a verdict. History loves clean lines. Wartime doesn't. Some transports were packed with troops who would have fought tomorrow. Others carried men whose only mistake was being on the wrong ship at the wrong hour. Prisoners and laborers were moved in the same gray silhouettes as soldiers. In the dark, through rain, through radar, a target is a shape that fits a rule. Afterward, the stories refused to fit in any box. Reports tried to tame it with numbers. Diaries did the opposite. A single sentence ending mid-word. A watch stopped at a specific minute. A name that only existed because someone wrote it twice. Survivors talked about choices that weren't choices at all. Stay below and breathe smoke, jump and drink oil. Sailors who couldn't stop to pick them up learned a different kind of guilt, knowing that rescue was a word the storm would not allow. There were sinkings that turned into courtroom echoes and dinner table debates for years, promises of safe passage broken, whispers of cargo that was more rumor than crate, wrecks that drew salvors like magnets and gave back mostly silence. Every new discovery on the seafloor felt like a letter finally delivered, and sometimes it brought comfort. Sometimes it didn't. But the ocean kept the bigger truth uncomplicated. If a nation lives by the sea, war punishes it at sea. When the shooting stopped, the lessons kept moving. Admirals wrote them into doctrine. Engineers built them into machines. Submarines went from supporting actors to the spine of modern navies. The idea was blunt and modern at once. If you can blind the other side, read their mail, and hit their logistics, you can move history without planting a flag anywhere new. For Japan, the memory didn't fade. It hardened. Training shifted toward the threat you can't see. Technology chased silence with sharper ears. Shipbuilders and sailors learned to think of the sea not as a highway, but as a contested, listening space where a mistake doesn't make noise. It just stops you. And for the rest of us, the undersea war left a quieter inheritance. It reminded planners that victory often looks like nothing happening. A factory that never gets its oil, an airfield that never hears engines, a convoy that never leaves because the last one didn't come back. It reminded storytellers that numbers are just the shadows cast by people. And it reminded sailors that courage doesn't make you visible, only vulnerable, unless you pair it with the right tools and a plan that respects the dark. So we returned to that night in the Strait, rain stitching sky to water, men on both sides listening harder than they ever had. The escorts did their duty. The submariners did theirs. The sea did what it always does. Keep the secrets it can, give up the rest in its own time. What changed the war wasn't one explosion or even 7. It was the quiet logic beneath them. Fix a broken weapon, see in the dark. Read the routes the enemy must take. Be patient. Hit where it hurts, not where it's loud. That's why the story of the silent hunters still pulls us in. Not because it's flashy, but because it's relentless. Not because it's simple, but because it's disciplined. And because somewhere, even now, a ship's bell from that era lies on the seafloor, tarnished and still. If you could ring it, the sound would take a very long time to die.